If you observe life very carefully, then you will realize that it is defined by a consistent confrontation between good traits and bad traits. Yes, it is the defining feature of life, a consistent confrontation between what brings us calm and peace or goodness, some might call it simply the good, and on the other side of this confrontation is difficulty, chaos, or evil, danger, harm, and self-harm. In fact, all that reality is a consistent competitive dance between good and evil, or harm or suffering, whatever you want to call the negative here. And this defining feature of reality is especially jarring when we, for the first time in our lives, come to realize that both good and some form of evil, or harm, or danger, or self-harm exist in a loved one, a family member close to us. That recognition, especially if and usually when it comes in early childhood, is eye-opening to say the least. There's no Indian mythology story that I can think of that better speaks to the quite complicated and consistent dance between goodness and suffering than the one I'm about to tell you. My name is Sonika, and I am the author of the book Who God Really Is. Today I bring you a story of how a Hindu Trinity God came through for his faithful devotee in the most hopeless situation one can possibly ever go through. A situation in which this devotee of Lord Vishnu was actually being tortured by his own father. As always, after telling you the story, I will explain the deeper, useful meanings of the Hindu scripture to you. Let's begin. In the age of Satya Yuga, two demon brothers, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, wreaked havoc across the world. They tormented humans and demigods or devas alike, spreading chaos wherever they went. The demigods, desperate for help, prayed to Lord Vishnu, the preserver of the universe. Hiranyaksha stole the earth, our earth, who was personified as the goddess Bhudevi at that time. He hid her in the cosmic ocean, plunging our world into darkness. Lord Vishnu, hearing the pleas of the demigods and even the other gods in the highest planes or celestial heavenly realms, took the form of Varaha, a mighty boar. He dove into the ocean, battled Hiranyaksha in an epic showdown, and defeated him with his powerful tusks. Gently, Varaha lifted Bhudevi back to her rightful place, restoring balance to the cosmos. But the story doesn't end there, with Mother Earth being placed back into its rightful position in the cosmos. Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha's brother, was furious. He swore revenge on Lord Vishnu and anyone who worshipped the Hindu Trinity God. Determined to become unstoppable, he retreated to the forest to pray to Lord Brahma, the creator god of the Hindu Trinity, for a special boon. For years he meditated, enduring storms, ants and insects, and hunger in the forest until his penance grew so intense that it scorched the heavens. Immersed in deep meditation, Hiranyakashipu gradually detached himself from worldly desires. Meanwhile, Indra, the king of the devas or demigods, noticed that the demons or asuras were no longer under the command of Hiranyakashipu. Seeing this as an ideal moment to strike, Indra decided to launch a full-scale attack, believing that the absence of their leader would make the asuras vulnerable. Seizing the opportunity, he led the devas or demigods into battle with great force, and as anticipated, he succeeded in defeating the asuras, killing most of them and securing victory in the war. During Indra's attack on Hiranyakashipu's city, Indra reached the palace and tried to take Hiranyakashipu's wife, Kayadu, hostage. Just then, The divine sage Narada Muni intervened and stopped him, insisting that Kayadu was innocent and should not be involved in the conflict. Indra agreed and released her. Kayadu, who was pregnant at that time and had nowhere to go, asked Narada for shelter. The divine sage took her in, and during her stay he told her stories of Lord Vishnu. These stories deeply inspired Kayadu and her unborn child, who listened from the womb and who would be named Prahlada in the future. Those stories planted a seed of devotion in the developing heart of Prahlada even before he was born. Meanwhile, the gods, feeling the heat from the urgency and depth of Hiranyakashipu's penance or sacrifice in the forest, begged Lord Brahma to intervene. The Hindu god Brahma appeared before Hiranyakashipu, who cleverly asked for the Hindu Trinity god for a boon that was almost nearly impossible to grant. Hiranyakashipu asked Lord Brahma, "Please make me a being who cannot be killed by any man nor animal. Please make me a being who cannot be killed during day nor night. Please make me a being who cannot be killed indoors nor outdoors. Please make me a being who cannot be killed on earth nor in the sky, and not even by any weapon." Now Lord Brahma, feeling the heat, the urgency, the desire toward himself and the other Hindu pantheon gods from Hiranyakashipu's severe and very devout penance, had to grant the demon king the boon he asked for. The urgency, the heat, the power, the desire, the attraction was just too strong. So Lord Brahma did exactly that. He granted the demon king Hiranyakashipu the boon he asked for. The demon king, now drunk with power, declared himself a god. He conquered the heavens, banned Lord Vishnu's name, and the demon king ruled with terror. Now, remember the demon's son Prahlada, who was introduced to stories of the Hindu god Vishnu right when he was still developing in the womb? Well, as he grew up, he became a devout follower of Vishnu, much to his demon father's rage. Hiranyakashipu, who hated Vishnu, couldn't stand his son's faith. He tried everything to stop him. He tried to get poisonous snakes to bite him, wild elephants to trample his son. He even ordered his sister Holika, who he believed, as she did, that she was blessed with immunity to fire, to seat her nephew on her lap in a blazing fire, hoping that the flames would finally kill Prahlada. However, the plan backfired. While Prahlada remained untouched by the flames, Holika was consumed by fire and surprisingly reduced to ashes. She wasn't so immune from this basic element after all. Prahlada, through all the torture from his demon king father, remained devoted to Lord Vishnu. By the way, if you're enjoying this story, please leave a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Your review will help these stories be discovered and keep them alive. Now, Hiranyakashipu's anger boiled over. He grabbed his son Prahlada and shouted, "Where is this Vishnu you love so much? Is he in this pillar?" Hiranyakashipu just then struck a palace pillar, and with a thunderous roar, Lord Vishnu appeared as Narasimha, his lion avatar, or a terrifying half-man, half-lion figure. Narasimha was neither man nor animal. He appeared at twilight, neither day nor night, on the palace threshold, neither indoors nor outdoors. He then placed Hiranyakashipu on his lap, neither on earth nor in the sky, and with his sharp claws, which is not exactly a weapon in traditional, terms, he defeated the demon king Hiranyakashipu. He brought death upon Hiranyakashipu, fulfilling the boon's conditions perfectly. Hiranyakashipu, the demon king, was dead. But Narasimha's rage didn't stop. His roars shook the universe, and even the gods were too scared, really scared, to approach. Only young Prahlada with his pure heart stepped forward. He sang Vishnu's praises, and Narasimha's fury began to fade upon hearing those praises of his name. Then Goddess Lakshmi, Lord Vishnu's divine consort, his beloved, appeared, her presence calming Narasimha further. Together, Prahlada's devotion and Lakshmi's calming embrace restored Vishnu's peace. Lord Vishnu's lion avatar, Narasimha, transformed back into the original Hindu Trinity God. And then Lord Vishnu said to Prahlada, "Those who chant my name with the same faith you have shown, I will always protect, even across lifetimes." That certainly reminds me of what I write about the phenomenon of reincarnation in my book, Who God Really Is, and the value of, worshiping God's name because of the fact of reincarnation that we are all subject to. So I'm definitely reminded of what I write in my book, Who God Really Is, by the end of this story. Prahlada, of course, grew up to be a wise and kind king. What are the important lessons we learn for our postmodern world lives from this Hindu myth of Vishnu's avatar Narasimha? Of course, there is the power of devotion even in the face of fear. Now, where this belief in and understanding of the power of devotion in the face of fear is really apparent right now in the West, at least to me, is amongst Christians. That's where I see it on a very massive scale, in a very evident, very apparent way. That's the faith group that makes it so evident, at least to me at this time. There are large groups of Christians who believe that they are being politically persecuted, and they keep highlighting their belief in the power of prayer in response to fear tactics brought upon them. But I'm really digressing here a bit. At the heart of reality, there's a constant tug of war, a competitive dance, as I call it in my book, Who God Really Is, and as I referred to it at the beginning of this podcast episode. It's not just good versus evil, but good traits versus bad ones, kindness against cruelty, harmony against harm, even self-love against self-destruction. This dance is never static. There's no state of nothingness. There's never a state of nothingness because there's either going to be goodness or some form of chaos or suffering. I make that very clear in my book. There's never been a state of nothingness. And, where we are at this point in existence, it's very difficult for us to even fathom a true state of nothingness because there's so much around us. There's so much media, right? There's so much in the universe. There's so much that astronomy experiments reveal to us that exists out there in the universe. Astronomical studies are also revealing to us that there's a lot out there in the universe, and there's also some intriguing things about even black holes. So there's no true state of nothingness. When we look forward, when we look even just in the present moment, it's kind of easy for us to get, okay, yeah, well, there probably is not a true state of nothingness. But when we look back at the history of existence, or when we ponder the history of existence, we are at times tempted into believing that there might have been at some point a state of nothingness, a state of nothing. But I make it very evident, and I explain in detail in my book, Who God Really Is, that there was never ever a true state of nothingness in existence. That can never be. And there was never a state of nothingness. And it's kind of a weird statement in itself, right? A state of nothingness in existence. Existence is something exists. There's a livelihood to it, or some vitality to it, where a state of nothingness implies almost something that we cannot ever really get, we cannot understand. And as I explain in my book, Who God Really Is, God wants to be understood. He never wanted to not be known by his children, so to speak, or by us, his offshoots, so to speak. A cruel parent is a parent who doesn't want to be known in any fashion. But God is not cruel, so therefore he can be understood. And so, there's always been God. He can be understood. A state of nothingness can never be understood. So it just doesn't sync with the truth of God, any state of nothingness. So where goodness takes root, at any moment in any nanosecond, there's no room for negativity, suffering, chaos, or evil. If there's a particle of goodness that exists at any point of existence, a particle of chaos cannot exist there. It's like a crowded stage. Only one can hold the spotlight. And this struggle isn't abstract, it's personal, it's universal, and it's woven into the fabric of existence. Hindu mythology, which I refer to as the mother and father of spirituality, of all spirituality, captures this reality so vividly. It doesn't shy away from life's intricacy and messiness. Instead, it shows us how good and evil clash, intertwine, and demand a choice from us consistently throughout life. We see this in action in the story that I just told you about Lord Vishnu's Narasimha or lion avatar, where a demon king and his own devoted boy or son embodied this cosmic dance. And even at the end, we see this sort of, almost a sort of chaotic nature appearing in Lord Vishnu's own avatar, the lion avatar. In the myth, we meet Hiranyakashipu, a demon king who's consumed by ambition, rage, but especially control. Control. He is very, very controlling. He wants control. He's so obsessed with control. And he performs this intense penance and he gets a boon. It's amazing. He gets this, near impossible gift from Lord Brahma. Hiranyakashipu basically cannot be killed by anyone. He's nearly immortal. Now, you might wonder, why would Brahma, one of the Hindu Trinity gods alongside Vishnu and Shiva, empower a demon? It's actually a pattern that we see in Hindu mythology. Lord Brahma often grants boons that spark chaos. But here's the thing. Brahma's role isn't to be the most revered or perfect. He's the creator. He's setting the stage for life's challenges, pushing the dance of good and evil, this confrontational and competitive dance between good and evil into motion. And that's what life is. Once we come into being, we are confronted with this, with goodness and suffering, or goodness and some form of suffering or chaos in the reality in front of us. And we are challenged. That confrontation that's consistent is actually leading us side by side, alongside it into a path of learning. So, a lot of people in the Hindu community kind of, claim that Lord Brahma is the least of the Hindu Trinity gods to be worshipped amongst Hindus and in India. But not a lot of people realize maybe why, or, what is it really about Lord Brahma that's so relevant and realistic to life? And it's that, the truth of the matter is, he's not a Hindu Trinity god who's there to be, perfect and, only there to be revered. He's the creator. And when creation comes about, as I explain in my book, Who God Really Is, alongside it, learning, the process of learning begins. And that's reality. Hinduism is, as I like to call it, the most true to reality religion in existence. That's why it's probably lasted as long as it has. Whereas Greek mythology, for example, or Roman mythology, Egyptian mythology, those would, founded in spirituality, just haven't lasted in the same way that Hinduism has, Hindu mythology has. So it's fascinating here. And, that's the substance, the nature of Lord Brahma. I argue in my book, Who God Really Is, that Hindu mythology reflects realism. It doesn't sugarcoat life, but that realism can be very hard to find for a lot of people who read the Hindu scriptures, because the mythology, the stories are so sometimes complicated, so many details, so many characters, and a real sense of surrealism, right? We know that we are not going to be saved by some lion avatar, right? Some half man, half lion figure popping up out of nowhere or out of the walls of our home while we are maybe being tortured by someone who's close to us, or when we are facing mental health crises. We know that that's not going to happen, but as I'm going to explain to you, there's a very deep meaning behind just the characters we have here and what's going on in their interactions, in their relationships with each other. And that's what we have to realize. Prahlada, the son here, he's born a radiant soul, a devotee of Vishnu, the very god his father despises. The juxtaposition we have here, this intertwining of light and dark, is so Hindu, it's so real. It shows reality as it is. Good and evil don't just face off, they coexist even within families. But here's the thing about Prahlada. Through all the torture that he's going through at the hands of his father, he doesn't give up on his faith, which what it's indicating to us is that he's using some sort of wisdom here to basically escape all the torture that he's going through. Yes, these are very surreal events. He's somehow miraculously not burned by fire. He somehow escapes, the poisonous traps of snakes and elephants who want to trample him. But because he holds on to his faith so strong, because that faith is sort of one with him. He has such a strong affinity to faith. The scripture is teaching us that throughout any form of torture that we are going through, maybe from ourselves, sometimes many times we engage in self-harm, other times we are confronted by harm from others, even those close to us. Through that moment, through those times, we have to hold on to our faith, because it is our faith that will give to us that wisdom that we need to be able to kind of escape harm, or to be not touched by it as strongly as we might have been able to if we were not guided by and anchored and rooted to wise knowledge. That's the key here. And Prahlada's quiet devotion is not just him surrendering to faith, but it's him sticking with faith, using it as an anchor that allows him to have the knowledge that he needs to have to escape these traps and the torture from his demon king father. Okay? Sometimes this surrender also, we see a sort of a surrender there, because Prahlada is saying, I'm not going to worry so much, or we don't see the boy here in the entire story exhibiting worry and fear. Instead, somehow he's kind of, almost like in a video game, he's kind of escaping all these traps. When you play video games and you have these characters, they're escaping traps. I remember playing Super Mario Brothers when I was younger, and there's all these traps that pop up, poisonous mushrooms and, holes in the earth and crumbling blocks and stuff, and Mario can easily be trapped, or some crocodiles in the ocean and Mario can be trapped by them. But Prahlada escapes the traps precisely because it's his faith that prevents him from getting into the state of mind of worry and fear and crying and sorrow. Instead, he's able to, almost like in a video game, he's able to just escape all of these traps. That's what's really happening here. So he is, by surrendering to faith, he doesn't end up surrendering to chaos and evil and traps and torment and torture around him. Sometimes in life, there's a sense of surrender that we have to go through. And that's actually how we negotiate between the good traits and the bad traits. It's actually the way to negotiate is in the understanding of surrender. Sometimes we have to surrender softly in order for us to negotiate successfully this consistent confrontation between good and chaos, evil or good and self-harm that we come across through life. That surrender is sometimes soft. It's a soft surrender. We sometimes let people have a little bit more of more of a benefit of the doubt or a little bit more of a win, because when we are guided by faith, it means we are guided by wisdom. We keep the bigger picture in mind, or what matters the most within a specific situation in mind. And sometimes, however, in life, a sort of surrender is more shocking, it's more jarring. And in this Hindu myth of Lord Vishnu's avatar, Narasimha, I show you, or I tell you about that shocking surrender, that hard power surrender that occurs at the very end. It's Hiranyakashipu's death. It's a shocking surrender which leads to divine justice. So good can't win unless evil yields, and vice versa. Hinduism's realism shines here. Life is a series of surrenders, big or small. That's how we are negotiating the consistent competitive dance between good and chaos in life that we are always confronted with. And it's these series of surrenders that we engage in, big or small, that if carried out or if undertaken properly, if they are rooted in wisdom, I should say, they will determine whether good or self-harm end up claiming space in our lives. As I say in my book, Who God Really Is, which, by the way, you should all check out on Amazon.com, wherever there is a particle of goodness, at that point of existence, a particle of chaos simply can never be. Okay? And vice versa. Prahlada's victory here in this myth it's not about surviving, but it's about self-preservation in the highest illumination. A kind of, we can survive, but we can maybe not thrive, right? We can survive, but we still are not happy with all the circumstances that we find ourselves in as we negotiate good and chaos. But if we are anchoring our decisions to surrender in wisdom, in God, in other words, in Hinduism, then our surviving is really about thriving, which is the highest illumination for life on earth. Remember, good and evil are always vying for space in your heart, in your choices, in your life. And life is always asking you, it's always demanding actually of you to make a choice between that good and chaos or good and self-harm. Hinduism's genius is its honesty. It doesn't promise a perfect world, even though there's a lot of surrealism in Hinduism. It doesn't promise a perfect world, but it's actually very true to reality. And that, even the Hindu gods themselves, as I said in a previous podcast episode, are placing themselves in almost human-like roles throughout the Hindu stories in order to just remain true to reality, to teach us how to navigate and negotiate reality as it is. Okay? Thanks for joining me on today's Naked Hindu Tales episode. Leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and ask me any spiritual or non-spiritual question you have there. I'll be sure to answer your question in a future episode for the benefit of all. Let me know your thoughts about experiences in which you recognized both good and chaos within yourself or someone close to you. How did you negotiate between the good and chaotic traits or tendencies within yourself or the other person? Let me know. Next time, I'll explore another deep and still very useful ancient Hindu myth for your postmodern world experience. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak with you in the next episode.